we've heard our doctors talk about keeping your body healthy, and now we've got our doctors of the heart and of the spirit to keep your heart and your spirit happy. And I want to tell you briefly how we've met 3 out of our 4 panelists. We're working on a documentary with our children about where they are interviewing spiritual leaders of different faiths, and we met 3 out of the 4 panelists in the quest to learn more about these different faiths. The first person we're having today on the panel is Reverend Heng, who's from the city of 10,000 Buddhas. And Reverend Sher, if you guys have seen any of our kids in action, took those 3 little untamed animals on a tour of the city of 10,000 Buddhas. He was immensely kind and patient with him, and they got very attached to him during the day that we spent with him. Reverend Sher was ordained as a Buddhist monk at the city of 10,000 Buddhas in 1976. He's from Toledo, Ohio, and he got an MA in Oriental Languages at the University of California. He is the director of the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. He holds a doctorate in religion from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, where he co-teaches a class on Buddhist-Christian dialogue. Reverend Sher is fluent in Mandarin Chinese, French, Japanese, and while taking a pilgrimage in, where was this? I'm going to read this. After receiving full ordination in the Mahayana tradition of Chinese Buddhism, he commenced a 3 steps, 1 bow pilgrimage, dedicating his efforts to world peace. Reverend Heng Sher traveled up the California Coast Highway from South Pasadena to Ukiah, a distance of over 600 miles in 2 years and 9 months. During the pilgrimage and for 2 years following, he kept a strict vow of silence. A journal of the pilgrimage with 1 heart, bowing to the city of 10,000 Buddhas, was subsequently printed in 9 volumes, including translations into Chinese and Vietnamese. He's been a vegetarian since 1969 and a vegan since 1980. He regularly speaks on the topic of compassionate eating to audiences around the world. And I'd like to introduce Reverend Sher.
Thank you. I'm not so sure about that music. First of all, I'd like to say how grateful I am to be invited into this community and to have the opportunity, along with my fellow panelists today, to speak about compassionate eating from the point of view of religion is, I think, might become the favorite part of this conference. Now, is everybody enjoying this conference as much as I have so far? I thought so. We've printed out a handout, and we don't know if we have quite enough for everybody. If you don't have one, maybe you can share with your neighbor. These are kind of the highlights and some of the takeaway points. Let's move to the presentation if we can. We'll see how technology serves us today. All right. Why eat a plant-based diet? These are familiar reasons. Health and longevity, environmental issues, thanks to John Robbins and the others who've certainly heightened my awareness of those issues. Global hunger and the distribution or maldistribution of foodstuffs. And then we have 2 items that, from a Buddhist point of view, are the foundation of why we do this, why we would want to eat compassionately and wisely. From the Buddhist point of view, you start out with the idea that we're all connected, that interdependence is a fact. It's not a theory. And yet, the world that we find ourselves is often a broken world. So there are causes and there are effects, and I'm going to talk a bit about that. The other point is great compassion. Buddhism is certainly not unique in this regard. We're going to hear from the other spokespersons this morning about other religious points of view. But these are the 2 that I wanted to go into today. Cause and effect. There's a teaching from a sutra called the Flower Adornment, the Hua Yan Jing, the Avatamsaka Sutra, that says, if one kills, There are two retributions. Well, one is you can lose your human body. That's what they say. I'm giving you the straight stuff, the raw milk right from the soybean, right? The karma, the action, and the results of killing beings brings on two retributions. One, a short life, and two, much illness. Now, likewise, if you cherish life, if you foster life, if you create the conditions for other beings to flourish, then what happens is your lifespan extends and you're healthy. So it works both ways. Here's an illustration. This is a poem from a Chan master, meditation master in China in the Tang Dynasty, whose name is Cloud of Vows. And the illustration, we're going to get to that in a minute. There's a cause and an effect in our picture, in our painting. It goes, for countless years, the bitter stew of hate goes boiling on. Its vengeful broth is ocean deep, impossible to calm. To learn the cause of so much conflict, terror, and that's a word that we're exquisitely sensitive to, green, orange, red. To learn the cause of so much conflict, terror, hate, and war, listen to the cries at midnight by the butcher's door. Okay, now, where do wars come from? Wars come from, now this is principle, okay? There's an invisible cause and effect. But I think if we stretch our minds, we can see the connection. If we kill the being whose life we force from its body, perhaps for our dinner table, perhaps for some other reason, certainly is not willing to do that. I wouldn't want to give up my thigh for somebody else's lunch, right? And when we do that, there's a hatred. There's an emotional, spiritual reaction to that, which is a hatred. And that hatred is kind of like a toxin in the body. It doesn't go anywhere. It just is there in space. When that becomes, when there's a lot of that all at once, the result boils over in immediate aggression and antipathy, which can then lead to war. So that's the principle. Now, is that how it works in reality? That's what this picture shows us, which I think is a lovely illustration. It's an ugly illustration of the actual principle. Taking the life of the pig can lead to the result of bigger conflict. Okay, cause and effect is one of the main Buddhist principal reasons for eating a vegetarian diet. What about great compassion? This is called Tong Ti Ta Bei in Chinese, and the idea is, literally in the Chinese, it's same body, great compassion. The same body that we share. And this is based, again, on very practical, pragmatic vision of the way things are, which is to say the solid parts, the liquid parts, the warm parts, the passages, the air parts in my body are not different in any way from those of any creature that incarnates in a body. So we share that same substance. Now, there's also something else we share. And again, this is maybe Buddhist specific, but we call it by other names and other traditions. There's an awakened nature that we share that in the teaching says it's not different from being to being. We cover it over, we uncover it, it's more awake, it's less awake, but it's the same. So in the midst of that interdependent, connected universe, somebody who is awake to that compassion wants to eat in a way that liberates living beings. So in the Buddhist tradition, we have this practice called liberating life, where we buy animals that are on their way to slaughter, do a ceremony, and chant sutras or the names of awakened beings and let them go. So there's a sutra called the Netta Brahma. It goes deeper into it. And this is, again, straight from the soybean milk. All male beings have been my fathers. All female beings have been my mothers. The interdependence. There is not one being in the six destinies who has not given birth to me in past lives. Hence, all beings have been my parents. Thus, when a person kills and eats any of these beings, by so doing, he slaughters my parents. Now, this is the vision of the Buddhas, awakened sages. Further, that person kills a body that was once my own, for all elemental earth and water have previously served as my body. All elemental fire and water have comprised my physical substance. Therefore, I will always cultivate the practice of liberating beings, and in every life be reborn in the eternally abiding Dharma, and teach others to liberate beings as well. Now, is that strong medicine? Any connection? There's a sense that that thing on the plate that's been French fried, parboiled, fricasseed, baked, steamed, stuffed, actually is part of my own substance. There's The idea is to see it as no different. And that being the case, I would wish long life to my mother and to everyone else's father. So I would choose not to make that as my foodstuff. Here's another illustration. This is one of the resources that Chinese Buddhism has in such abundance that because it's been in Chinese language, has not been available until we started translating. This is a lovely poem that I enjoy. The picture is a hermit, the kind-hearted hermit. Notice there's a deer in the background, and the hermit is sweeping away the deer's tracks in the snow so that the hunters the next morning won't find it. Around this lonely mountaintop, a myriad peaks revolve. I've come to cultivate ascetics, disciplined resolve. I take my broom and sweep away the deer's tracks in the snow. The deer passed by, but in the morning, hunters will not know. Great compassion, single substance. So if we see those creatures with whom we share those bodies as kin, as related, as connected, then it's much harder to see them as something that we eat for lunch, to see them as a dish or a plate or succulent veal, or whatever those names we give it. Okay, so that's the fundamental idea. How does it play down? How does it actually work? I want to tell a story about an experience I had. Sabrina mentioned that at one point in my life I did a pilgrimage. And in that pilgrimage I was bowing for world peace. And we traveled from South Pasadena up Highway 1 to Ukiah, a distance of about 600 miles. Now, we met some very interesting folks, and probably one of the most interesting was someone who came down to talk to the two monks, myself and the other monk who's there in the photo. I met a fellow named Howard Swanson, and Howard Swanson was the foreman of the Hearst Ranch. Did you know that San Simeon has a cattle ranch attached to it? So it's right up there on the bluff or beyond. So Howard Swanson. Now, I was silent all this time. I was silent for actually 6 years during this period. Luckily, I'm talking now, or else we'd have a problem. I'd have to rely more on the slides. But this is the first time a PowerPoint show has worked, mind you, so keep praying, right? So I was sitting by the side of the road, taking a break from the bowing and writing in a journal, when this Ford Bronco came squealing down, cloud of dust, very appropriate, a Ford Bronco. These are the motorized cowpokes, right? So we're sitting by the side of the road, and we hear slam, chink, 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 chink. And it's a Monday morning early, and what goes chink, chink, chink across the road? So I'm looking at the other monk, and he's looking at me. Chink, 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 chink. A pair of broken down, dusty cowboy boots, a pair of faded, dusty blue jeans, a gun belt, and a big silver buckle that says Hearst Ranch. Okay, so that's just, I was sitting, so my eyes only got to the belt buckle. And I'm looking up, and there's this huge 10-gallon hat. And I think, oh my God, a cowboy. Now, is this guy going to say, this highway ain't big enough for both of us? What's he going to say? So, not a bit. What did he do? He had his palms together, and he did a half bow, and he says, howdy, fellers. He says, my name's Howard Swanson. He says, I'm a Buddhist. And I thought, only in California. He said, sure enough, right here, he says, Sri Lankan Buddhist Association, see that? He says, that's my name, yep. He says, but I want to ask you, you guys are Buddhists, right? I said, yep, that's right, Howard. He says, you all meditate? Well, yeah, quite a bit. He says, but, you know, I figure Americans just wasn't cut out to meditate, right? No, we do a lot of it. What's wrong? Well, when I meditate, my mind's just in a whirl. What do I do? What's wrong? The other monk goes, well, Howard, do you eat meat? Howard says, you kidding? I'm a cowboy. That's all I eat. I eat nothing but meat. Sure, I eat meat. What a silly question. He says, well, you know, if you killed a man, how would you feel? Could you rest? Probably not. Probably thinking about it all the time. Well, those cows, you know, same nervous system, pretty much the same DNA. Probably can't forget it. That's why you can't meditate. He says, but if I don't eat meat, what do I eat? Well, so the monk says, well, you know what, I got some Chinese canned Arhat vegetables, you know, companion brand, canned in Taiwan. Try this. He says, that looks like dog food. And he said, that's all right. It tastes really good, Howard. Try it. See what you think. Then go meditate. So Howard says, well, you know, those guys in the bunkhouse, they're going to laugh me out of the place if I start eating dog food, but I got a Buddhist fist that'll answer to that, he says. And Howard, not clear on the concept, but never mind. Try the vegetarian food, and then come back and tell us how you meditated. So another week goes by, we're up the road, and next Monday morning, screaming cloud of dust, Ford Bronco, chink, 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 chink. Here comes Howard. And he says, hey, monks. He says, boy, I had the best meditation I ever had. Who would have thought it was the meat? He says, of course, it still tastes like dog food, but that's all right. If I can meditate, I'll do anything. He says, boy, that's great. Thanks a lot. So California is the place where we have vegetarian cowboys. And bless Howard Swanson for making the point that, in fact, if you want to meditate any kind of spiritual life, if you can eat a vegetarian diet, then your meditation, your prayer life goes more smoothly. Stories like that and others are available at BTTS Online. All of these principles and stories that these resources we're making available at www.drba.org. And it's also on the printout. drba.org has access to, there's a vegetarian link that has resources on not only Buddhist vegetarian eating, but also on other religious resources. And it's gathered by a professor at San Francisco State. So please do check out drba.org. If you're in Northern California, especially north of Santa Rosa, please visit the City of 10,000 Buddhas Junkong Vegetarian Restaurant. The Santa Rosa Press-Democrat says it's among the 10 best restaurants north of San Francisco, by golly. Closed on Tuesdays, but give them a call. And do come up and try some of our Buddhist vegetarian cooking. Okay, last slide. I'm hoping that with the panelists, we can actually take advantage of Jeff and Sabrina's conference to create a lasting, enduring interfaith vegetarian resource, because every faith has tremendous resources, but often we don't go there first when it's time to talk about vegetarian eating. We'd like to change that. So United Religions Initiative is a place where this can happen. URI. All right? Thank you very much. We'll be back to answer questions and to have a conversation with you in a bit.